Welcome, everybody, and good afternoon. Call this meeting to order. The very first item on our agenda, we have a lot of proclamations to do today, and it's a very special day in Hagerstown. The first proclamation we have is for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'd like to invite Janet Long up to the front here. And Janet, I'd like to present to you this proclamation for National Breast Cancer Awareness Month for October of 2013. Whereas breast cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer-related deaths among women, second only to lung cancer, and whereas breast cancer occurs mainly in women, but men can get it too, and whereas breast cancer knows few boundaries, it is one of the most frequently diagnosed cancers today, and everyone is potentially at risk despite age, sex, or family history. And whereas research shows that deaths from breast cancer could be reduced significantly by routine screenings, including mammographies, regular examinations by a physician, and monthly self-examinations. And whereas mammography is recognized as the single most effective method of detecting breast changes that may be cancerous long before physical symptoms can be seen or felt. And whereas in recognition of breast cancer awareness, Park in the Pink awareness ribbons will be tied on parking meters and trees in the city center from October 14th, 2013 through October 18th, 2013. And whereas during National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we renew our commitment to fighting this disease, raising awareness, and supporting those affected by breast cancer. Now, therefore, I, Dave Geisberts, the mayor of the city of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby proclaim October 2013 as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month in Hagerstown, Maryland. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Janet, would you like to tell all the folks about your organization and what you do?
I would love to. We are a local nonprofit here in Hagerstown, Maryland that provides early detection and after diagnosis support programs. Everything we do is free. Every dollar that we get from events and just donations and memberships stays right here in the Hagerstown and Cumberland Valley area to support the women and their families that have been diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm a 13-year survivor, will be this year in November, so thank you. So I'm very much appreciative of this proclamation. I really appreciate excuse me, I really appreciate the support of the mayor and the council, and I want to thank everyone for supporting breast cancer awareness. And I'm so appreciative, too, that you let us do the parking meters and the trees each year. And this year, we're expanding with lighting Hagerstown by putting pink lights around the fountain at City Park, and then we're lighting the tower at City Hall with pink lights as well. So I'm very appreciative. So thank you all so very much.
Well, thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you. Pink ribbons, everyone.
Oh, good. Thank you. We have pink ribbons.
Wear those. That
Thank
would be
you.
Great.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Oh, sorry, Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank you. Take one, pass it around.
She was on WJEJ recently and did a good job.
The next proclamation is very special, and we have some very special guests with us here today. This proclamation is a special new sister city partnership. Some weeks ago, the council authorized our staff to go ahead and form a partnership with our sister city, Hagerstown, Indiana. And I've personally been to Hagerstown on one of my cross-country journeys. It's about 4 miles off of Interstate 70, just west of the eastern border of Indiana. And we're very delighted to have with us here today some special guests from Hagerstown, Indiana. And if I'd like to invite them up at this time, we have the town manager, Mr. Warner, and Councilmember Longbons. Please come on up. And also Mike Kiefer, who is a citizen who really spearheaded this effort, along with his wife, to get these folks to come here. They're in the area for a wedding, one of their family members, and so we really appreciate them being here. Gentlemen, come on over here. We'll stand here. I want to read to you a proclamation. Come stand over here and face our audience and our viewers at home. We have a lot more viewers at home than can fit in our council chambers here today. This is a special recognition, a proclamation of our sister city partnership with Hagerstown, Indiana. Whereas the cities of Hagerstown, Maryland and Hagerstown, Indiana share the same name and a shared history, and whereas the cities of Hagerstown, Maryland and Hagerstown, Indiana would like to begin a sister city partnership which provide cultural exchanges and friendship among citizens and businesses of Hagerstown, Maryland and Hagerstown, Indiana, and whereas the two municipalities wish to share history, friendship, appreciation of the arts and culture among citizens and businesses, and along with the features and benefits of living in such interesting and dynamic locations. And whereas a sister city partnership will reinforce connections, past and present, between the two cities and be a benefit to both communities. Now therefore I, David Geisberts, the mayor of the city of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby recognize and proclaim a sister city partnership with the city of Hagerstown, Indiana, and urge all citizens to join in supporting and encouraging further development of this relationship. And I hope that the representatives of Hagerstown, Indiana will equally support this cultural exchange. So on behalf of the City Council, the citizens of Hagerstown, I'd like to offer you this proclamation in exchange. We also have some very special gifts for you here. These gentlemen and their wives have been on a whirlwind tour of all that is good in Hagerstown and Washington County. I don't know how you fit a wedding into all of it, but they've been very busy. Thanks to Tom Reifert and the folks at the Convention and Visitors Bureau for putting a lot of activities together and helping to plan. Karen Giffin in our Community Affairs office, who also helped put this together, along with the Kiefers and many other community members in different organizations. We also have Linda Irvin Craig. Please come on up.
I would like to present them.
And Linda is with the Washington County Historical Society.
There's a book about our founder for each of you and one for the team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. And also, this is the first in my 10 months and 1 week in office, the first key to the city of Hagerstown that I have given out. So I hope you take this. I don't know which doors it actually opens yet, but you're welcome to stick around and try them out on all the doors. But this is just a token of our friendship and the fact that you're always welcome here in Hagerstown, Maryland.
You're here.
While you're doing that,
Sure. We also have a Hagerstown flag, which looks like the original flag there that was designed by Ms. Burhans, who was the wife of our former mayor. So we'd like to present this to you as well. And just in case that wasn't enough, something that, no, not a new car, but we hope that you might find somewhere in your town hall or some other public place where you might display this picture of Hagerstown 615 on the square, and this portrays an old wintry night down in our square here that we love so much. So on behalf of the City Council again and the citizens of Hagerstown, we offer this to you in friendship, and again, welcome you to Hagerstown anytime.
thank you very much.
And
If I might be able to
Please,
speak a few words, I
please.
don't think I'll need the mic.
okay, speak loudly.
The first thing I want to do is I want to thank the mayor and the council members for helping this to be expedited to get to where we are today. This was an idea of mine that I kick-started about 2 years ago in my own mind. Within the last year, I really started doing something with it. I found out I wasn't the only person that ever thought about doing it, but obviously I was the first one to kick the snowball down the hill. So here we are today. So again, I want to thank the mayor and the council for everything they've done, and the committee members that I put together to help research this project to see if it was going to be a success or not. It has been. I've had a wonderful 3 days with our guests from the other end of town. And I'm looking forward, I'm already planning on going to Hagerstown, Indiana in August to be part of their celebration, so we can tie this thing up completely. And anybody that wants to venture out there during that time, we'll get a bus and we'll all go and we'll have a good time, okay? But what I want to do right now is, you can see I've made it official. I wanted to wait until it was proclaimed, so that it has been. And since we've done that, I want to present each one of the fellows with one, and I have two here for the wives as well. So again, guys, it's been a wonderful couple days, and I cannot wait to come out to your end of the Hagerstown, far west, and enjoy your company out there. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some gifts of our own.
Oh, wow, okay. I was going to ask if you wanted to say a few words.
While he's getting the gift, I'll say a few words. On behalf of Hagerstown, Indiana, and the council and our employees like Bob, we want to express our deep gratification to you about how you've welcomed us here and made us feel like a part of your family and a part of your community. And it's been a great 3 days for us. We are very appreciative of it. You should be extremely proud of your community and the things that you're doing here. It's kind of been the wow factor for us to see some of the great things that you have instituted here in your community and in your town. And you should be very proud of what you're doing. And Bob and I just said on our way back to the motel to get ready to come here, we said, you know, what I've noticed here is that everything you do here, you do it exceptionally well. And you should be very proud of that you do that. So on our behalf, we just say thank you for your hospitality, your friendliness, your wonderful food, which I'm going to have to go on a diet now when I go back. And we are very appreciative of you and council and everybody that has been a part of this as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good comments.
Two of the things that Hagerstown, Indiana is noted for. One, we have Abbott's Candy, which is a candy factory that's been in business since the 1800s. And we have brought some boxes of candy
Oh, thank you.
for the mayor and the council.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Always just something.
That's great.
Yeah, we're going to
Yeah, right?
We're gonna give them
Now it's
some-
our turn.
Yes.
That's right.
Thank you.
And of course, can't leave out Mike Keaton. Mike. Thank you. We also, a company that was started back again in the 1800s, it's gone through some different changes. The actual company was called Perfect Circle Corporation, and they made piston rings. That company has since moved out of town, but they still have a division there that makes scientific toys for children. And they make gyroscopes. We're the gyroscope capital of the world.
Oh, nice.
So we also have
Oh, thank you.
gyroscopes for all of you.
We need to know where we're going. We need to know where we're going here.
Wow. My grandson's going to love that.
And
I could use some of those
pass
pistons.
those in. They also make other scientific toys. This is called a rattleback, and it's, well, spin it, watch it reverse. It's a magnifying glass. So it's a number of toys in one. So
Wow.
Thank you.
it's one that-
No toys during council meetings. I don't want to have to confiscate anybody's toys.
And we also, Mike had put together a committee of 12 or 13, and so we brought some boxes of chocolates and gyroscopes and these toys for all that committee too. We'll give them to Erin and Mike and let them pass those out.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is a great start to a wonderful relationship. I really appreciate you guys
Thank you.
being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Should we get a group photo?
Jonathan Hager
Sure.
would be proud.
Why don't the whole council, why don't we come up?
Let's get the council in on this.
Come on, Kristen, Penny.
On three. 1, 2. You do a couple more. 1, 2, 3.
You she didn't say one more.
1, 2, 3.
Never had one with Bruce since he's from Indiana.
Yeah.
You want to throw off Erin's balance.
Between Erin and city manager with me from Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on 3 again. 1, 2, 3. You can get this chair.
I'll make you stand the rest of the night.
One more for everyone. 1, 2, 3. You can take a small step to your left.
Two families, you know.
1, 3, 1, 2. They'll look great when you see them.
Okay. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. Thanks
you.
for being here.
Thanks for coming in, sir.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure meeting you, talking with you. Don't get this credit game.
Here we come back to Indiana. South of.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. One more proclamation. This is Character Counts Month. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Carolyn Brooks. And is Chelsea Miller, is she here as well? Please come forward. Hi, Carolyn. Nice to see you. And Chelsea? See you too. This is a proclamation for Character Counts. I'm sorry, it's Character Counts Week. Might as well be the Character Counts Month.
Well, it is
Character Counts every day.
Absolutely.
Character Counts Week will be October 20th through 26th, 2013. And this is a proclamation to declare it such. Whereas the next generation will be stewards of our communities, nation, and world in critical times, and the present and future well-being of our society requires an involved, caring citizenry with good character. And whereas the character of the nation is only as strong as the character of its individual citizens, and the public good is advanced when people are taught that good character counts in personal relationships, in the workplace, school, and throughout the community. And whereas Character Counts provides a framework for universal values that transcend culture, religious, political, and socioeconomic values through the 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And whereas these pillars of character can be learned and modeled by leaders of our community to improve interactions in our society among citizens of all ages, in turn fostering a higher quality of life and enhancing the image of our city. And whereas we count on our partners to help provide strong and constructive guidance for our citizens through Character Counts in our homes, schools, religious institutions, civic groups, places of business, and community gathering places. And whereas the character and conduct of our youth reflect the character and conduct of society, therefore every adult has the responsibility to teach and model the core values. And every social institution has the responsibility to promote the development of good character. Now, therefore, be it resolved, with the support of the City Council, I, Dave Geisberts, the Mayor of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby proclaim and recognize October 20th through 26th, 2013, to be Character Counts Week, and urge all city employees to seek out opportunities to incorporate these core principles into their work in parks and recreation activities, child care programs, community events, and I encourage all citizens, corporate and individual, to model these traits of good character in an ongoing commitment to promote character development and proper behavior throughout our community. So thank you so much, Carolyn. And would you like to, and Chelsea, thank you. Would you like to say a few words about your involvement with character
We're going
counts?
to be talking a little bit more about character counts. So for now, I can say we didn't bring candy or anything like that, but I do have 6-pillar pins for each.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank
And at this time, I know John Lestitian from our staff, we have an agenda item that has to do with character counts. We'll do a quick photo, sure. And one for Facebook. And so if you haven't liked the City of Hagerstown's Facebook page, please do, and you'll be able to see all these photos yourself. And at this point, we'll welcome you back to the table.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, we have a few guests involved in a presentation, and staff have been working with Carolyn and Chelsea for months, talking about character counts and making it real. And Carolyn, if you want to add some comments just about that before we invite the staff up for their presentation.
I'm sure you all are familiar with the fact that I have been involved with character counts since 1999. And actually, I brought it to the community as part of, I was the hotspot coordinator, it was then, and then later on it was the C-Safe coordinator. And it was a vital part to what we were doing with that initiative and that strategy. I continue to work with character counts. We have an all-volunteer coalition that meets monthly, and we've been advocates for good character, using the 6 pillars, since that 1999 timeframe. And we as a group, and I know the whole community, feels that good character traits are important, and character counts does provide a framework to teach values and to evaluate good character. And we certainly look forward to the strengthening partnership with the city to develop our strategies.
And I would simply add that from a staff perspective, the issues that we face in community development and economic development, a core foundation of strong character is needed to overcome some barriers. And spreading the message and strengthening the city's commitment to this program and incorporating this program are tied to community and economic development, and a step towards becoming a more welcoming and inclusive community as well. And from a staff perspective, we see the embracement of our diversity and the building of strong character as core issues to strengthen us as a community. With that, we have some guests. The 3 of us are going to retreat to the audience. Erin and Sarah will come up to the table, as well as we have Megan Kiley with us this evening. She's an HCC student and a recipient of a Character Counts Scholarship. And we also have Ella Falk here this evening. Ella is a 2nd grade student at Pangbourne Elementary. She is the daughter of Paul Falk and his wife Kimberly. Paul is our inspections manager. And she won in December of 2012 a Character Counts Award for demonstrating extraordinary character. And she's going to cover a little bit about what the pillars are. And we're doing this evening, inviting people in to demonstrate that the program's alive in the community, and then our proposal is to strengthen it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. One of the reasons that we invited Ella here today was to share with you a little bit about what the pillars of character counts are, So Ella, would you mind telling us really quick what the pillars are?
Trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, citizenship.
Thank you. That was great. And those are the basis of the entire Character Counts program, and demonstrating those principles is why she won the award for excellence in the community. So we really appreciate her being here today. And Megan is also here to share with us a little bit about her experience with Character Counts and why it matters in our community.
Okay. Throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school, the 6 pillars of character counts were, established in our lives every day, and it was something we loved demonstrating throughout high school. But as we went our separate ways after we graduated, I noticed that the 6 pillars started to kind of fade out of our lives. And I believe it's important as a community that we bring it back and that we show that the 6 pillars of character counts, they're important. We need to show that as adults, children look up to us in positive ways, and we need to be that positive role model that demonstrates the 6 pillars every day in our lives. So hopefully as the generations grow, the generations will grow, and it'll forever be in our community.
Thank you, Megan. All right. Megan has to leave. She has class at HCC, and we want to make sure that
She's a responsible.
And Ella, if you want to go sit back down with your dad for a little bit. Thank you very, very much.
Good job.
Thank you, Megan.
Good job.
We, as staff, we've been meeting with Carolyn and some of the coalition members of Character Counts on a really regular basis, as John mentioned, but we wanted to start off tonight kind of showing the council how these traits are demonstrated and lived in the school system in our community. And what we've been really looking to do is strengthen that program and reinforce it in the broader community. Part of my role at the city is to work in community development, and the pillars of Character Counts are foundational for anything that we do in terms of community development or community building in the city. If we aren't demonstrating these and gathering around these principles in the community, then we don't have a place to start. And so we really feel like they're important, and we've been focusing together on how we can make character counts real. So it's not something that our students see only in the school system, and then character counts matters only there and not out here. But that the message that they're getting is that, no, character counts matters everywhere that you are. It matters in our city, and who we are matters. I think one of the things that it does is it reinforces aspects of our society that we're kind of having some difficulty latching onto in these times. And so it gives us a place to stand. And character development affects our families, our businesses, the quality of life in our neighborhoods and in the core. And who we are as a community matters. And Character Counts creates a framework for us of universal principles that are tangible, that are easy to express, that gives a common language and consistency of messaging from kindergarten up through the rest of our community. And we just think that it's really important for us to take a leadership role in embracing that common language around character in our community.
And in accepting this program, this is something that the city, I think is a priority that the city must take a leadership role. Our values speak volumes about who we are as a community. And if we embrace these as our values, and it's directly tied to our identity, I think the city will have a much more positive image. We also visited the city of Gaithersburg, both staff and members from the Character Counts Coalition, because they have been a Character Counts community since 1996. They have branded themselves as a Character Counts community to see how they successfully implemented it there. Character Counts is clearly incorporated as much as with their logo, with their city's logo. There's lots of visible signage all throughout their city. It's even interwoven into their language. Some of their parks and recreation facilities incorporates the pillars within their rules and regulations. And actually, our visit, I think, was a challenge to the staff in Gaithersburg about how to re-examine the program and refresh it within their community as well. Internally, it's important that the city sets the tone for how this is incorporated. Successfully integrating character counts within our organization will make for a more successful integration within the community. We'll set an example. We have discussed character counts with the department managers to get their buy-in, to get their suggestions, and I think that went over well. So just giving you a kind of picture of how we could implement it within the organization. In human resources, incorporating the pillars into our hiring process and our employee review process, so that we're telling people, you're not only being hired for your skills and your talents, but we're also hiring you for your character as well. Branding within our organization, using universal letterhead across all the departments that shows the pillars. And again, just making each department and all the employees familiar with the 6 pillars of character. Externally, I think from our visit with Gaithersburg, we learned that visibility is very important to brand it with our community. We've looked at putting banners on the gateways into the city to make sure that it's clear that you're in a character counts community. I also think we can incorporate the language around parks and recreation. And I think it's important to connect those pillars to tangible actions. So for example, putting the responsibility pillar on a trash can to remind people that they have a responsibility to properly dispose their litter. Putting the caring pillar maybe on a door handle to remind people that it's caring to open the door for someone else. Or even putting the fairness pillar on our basketball courts and playground equipment around our parks. We'd also like to put a character counts specific page on the city website that would explain the program as well as explain why the program has merit in our community. We've also thought of nominating a person of character that would be recognized by mayor and council, and someone who quantifies each of those 6 pillars. So with all this being said, we'd like to hear some of your thoughts, maybe your suggestions, and we'd also ask that you would approve a resolution in your October regular session to officially make Hagerstown a character counts community.
Well, I think personally it's a great idea. I want to thank Carolyn Brooks for all the work that she's done with this program over the decades. When I worked at South Hagerstown High School for 2 years, I was the recipient of a mini grant from the Character Counts organization so that I could take the students that I worked with, which was in school suspension and after school suspension, to do ropes course so they could build their sense of character and teamwork, trustworthiness, caring, respect, all of those pillars of character. And it was highly successful. So I want to thank her and all the work that she's done in our community in various organizations that she's been a part of. But I think this is a fantastic idea. I've seen it work in Gaithersburg. I've used to work there and know that they have the signage everywhere. It's on their letterhead, like you said, and I think it would be a great thing for the city of Hagerstown to undertake. That's just my opinion.
I think it's great. And I've been involved with character counts. So.
Outstanding. And sorely needed.
Well, I think you've got the nod to continue, and really appreciate the work you've put into this. And thank you to everybody who came out tonight in support of it.
And if you think of ideas for Erin or Sarah along the way, just let them know, because I think clearly we want to show it in the community as well as in the government. So if something comes to mind for you where we can demonstrate character counts, feel free to let any of us know.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right. Now on to the fun stuff. Healthcare.
The fun stuff. Well, you asked the Congress.
Yeah. No, we're not going to talk about that, Don. Welcome to the table.
Hello. We're joined this evening by Becky Royal. Becky is a senior employee benefits consultant with CBIZ. She works very closely with staff as well as the healthcare committee. And the purpose this evening is informational. We wanted to provide you just a brief overview of the healthcare program. And I know everyone's been hearing more about national healthcare in the news. We wanted to get in front of you to discuss some of the major mandates and how they will affect us as an employer. So with that, I'll hand it over to Becky.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Hopefully you all received the attachment that we're just going to go through. And again, as Karen said, we're going to start with just a high-level overview of the city's health plan and then talk about the impact that health reform has had and will continue to have on the program, and then go through some of the issues and concerns that we're currently working on with the Benefits Committee, and then talk about some proposed action items and the timing of those action items. So at this point, this is all informational and we're not looking for any action on your part. So page 2 of the handout has some planned costs for the medical, pharmacy, and dental programs. And as you probably know, these plans are self-funded, which simply means that there's not an insurance company processing the claims. All the claims are funded by the city. There is protection in the form of stop-loss insurance, which would protect the city in the case that you have any individual catastrophic claimant. So the city's liability on any individual participant is up to $225,000 a year, at which point insurance would pick up. The chart in the center shows the medical and pharmacy costs for the plan year that just ended. The city's plan year runs on a July 1 to June 30th basis. And so the medical pharmacy costs were almost $5.8 million, which was an 11.5% increase over the prior year. For the plan year that we're in, we are projecting that those costs will be about $6.4 million, so about an 11% increase over the year that just ended. And then just projecting to the next plan year that begins next July, we're looking at costs that might be around $7.3 million. So we're looking at double-digit cost increases each year, and much of that is just driven by general health plan inflation. Inflation on its own for healthcare plans is running at about 8% a year. And the city has been running a little bit higher than that, and some of that is just based on utilization of the city's plans and the demographics of the group here. The health reform mandates are impacting the cost too, and we'll go into that in just a few moments.
Becky, if I could just jump in, and maybe this is for Karen. Those numbers include employees and retirees?
That's correct. So these numbers include employees and retirees. They also are gross costs, so they're not net of any employee or retiree contributions. So, for example, on the health plan, of that $5.8 million, employees and retirees paid about 22% of that through their contributions.
And this is all funds, all employees, not just general fund numbers here. This would be all city expense.
Correct.
Across the utility workers, the enterprise fund workers, utilities.
Right, this is total.
Right, I just want to make sure you understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right. Page 3 at a very high level shows some of the health reform mandates that have impacted the plan, and the top of that shows the changes that impacted the plan through 2013. So some of the items that have gotten the most press are expanding coverage for any child up to age 26, removing any lifetime or annual dollar limits, and covering preventive care at 100%. The items coming up for the July 1st, 2014 plan year are that all large employer plans that offer coverage have to make it affordable and adequate, or else they might receive a penalty from the federal government. So we have run the city's plans through some tests and have confirmed that your plan does pass all of those tests, so you're not at risk of any kind of a penalty. There are some new fees that will impact the city. The first is to fund patient-centered outcomes research. In 2014, that fee will just be about $1,000. It will double in 2015, and then it will be impacted by just an inflationary increase until 2019 when that goes away. The third fee is larger. This funds transitional reinsurance, and it will be about $55,000 in 2014, and this fee is only supposed to be in place for 3 years. Another item in 2014 is to change the full-time eligibility definition for health benefits down to 30 hours a week. And then the last two items are more plan design type of changes that will come into play next year. In 2015, there'll be some additional IRS reporting, again, just to confirm that you're doing all of the right things so that you don't receive any penalties. And then in 2018, the item to be concerned with is the excise tax, or what you might have seen in the press as called the Cadillac tax on high-cost health plans. So I think this is a concern for the city's plans. Your plans are very rich. Your demographics are a little bit older, so you have higher plan costs. And I think that, you know, unless some changes are made to plan design and utilization, that you may be at risk of hitting this excise tax in 2018. Right now, very preliminary, we're estimating that the tax could be about $100,000 in 2018.
I mean, I hear what you're saying for that last point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in my mind, I'm attempting to digest it, and it seems almost conflictory with the number of points for 13 and 14. You know, where it removes these limitations within a plan you would subscribe to, but then penalizes you for a plan that's too rich in the things that you would prefer to limit that you prescribe to. I'm not sure how you reconcile those, because either way you're going to eat that cost. In other words, you're going to eat it if you reduce it full time from 32 to 30 hours. You're going to eat it when you have the reimbursement limited to $2,500. Definitely by including children to the age of 26. I would hope that my kids are gone by the time they're 26, but maybe not. And you're going to eat it in a number of these other things. But if you don't do those things and you go with a plan then that's amenable to those larger amenities, then you're going to have that balancing point where you reach a plan that is too lucrative to the employee, that you're being mandated to provide a certain type of plan for, and you're going to eat it that way because you're going to get taxed for doing that very same thing. That just seems contradictory to me.
Well, what are the drivers that would make us a high-cost plan?
Well,
what are the drivers to that?
For one thing, your plan is very rich compared to, it has a very rich level of benefits.
What makes it defined that way?
Well, it has 100% in-network benefit level. So, for example, if you followed what's being offered through these exchanges, they're offering plans at 4 different levels that they've called different metals. So bronze is the lowest, then silver, then gold, and then platinum. So your plan, your level plan, is better than the platinum plan that's through the exchange.
And for example, the pharmaceutical cost. A difference in level of plan may say, the employee will absorb X% of pharmaceutical cost, or some small amount. But then on the flip side of that, it says in 2014, out-of-pocket medical maximum must include pharmacy expenses. So you either say you're going to pay it in one end, or you're going to provide it on the other. And by paying it on the one end, you pay for it, or by providing it, you pay because you're providing.
Right. So the law is enriching your benefits plus taxing you if your benefits are too rich.
Yes, that's pretty clear on this page.
It seems to me that if they're going to define rich, they can't, or they shouldn't be, including their own criteria. There must be something beyond that base.
So,
or is that not accurate? It doesn't make sense.
So they're benchmarking, the plans that they're really benchmarking at these exchanges is the silver level, which has an actuarial value of 70%.
They're picking a plan, that
Right.
fine line in between the two.
And your plan, as I said, is higher than a platinum plan, which a platinum plan has a 90% actuarial value. So as you can see, the delta between those is pretty big.
By too low a plan, we're going to penalize you.
It's no
too
wonder
high a
that-
plan, we're going to tax
right.
you.
Right. So,
Like, do they define essential health benefits? I mean, that's all in capitals there.
Okay.
And I'm looking at that phrase, and I'm trying to figure out, if there's no dollar limit now on essential health benefits, somebody had to sit down and say, here are the things that are included in essential health benefits.
So Health and Human Services came up with some broad categories of what's an essential health benefit. Things like things like hospitalization.
May include but not limited to.
Well, hospitalization, emergency care, prescription drugs, that sort of thing. But then they left it to each state to say, you decide in your state what else is going to be essential. And so each state has done that. So there's going to be variation among states. Now, as a self-funded plan, you're not obligated to go with what the state of Maryland says is essential. You can determine what you think is essential. And what some plans are doing is they're looking at all of the states and then they're picking a state to benchmark off of that they feel is acceptable. And once, we'll work with the benefits committee on that. But essentially, you're going to be covering those major categories without any limits. And you pretty much do that today anyway.
If we're going to get fined $100,000, I hope maybe we can, if there's places we're not hitting those limits, if we could reinvest it there, take away, I'd be interested in the future to know how to, because why just lose it out there? Let's, try to invest, can we invest it somewhere that it's more profitable within the healthcare system?
Right, so those are the things that we're working on with the benefits committee, is looking at what we can do to help curb the cost increases. Because if we can do that and stop having these double-digit increases every year, then hopefully we can avoid hitting that threshold or reducing it, certainly. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on.
That's subject to employee groups within specific jurisdictions agreeing to those changes.
Yeah, I wrote that.
Correct, for current language.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, so if you go on to the next page, we'll go into some of those things. So as we talked about, you've been having double-digit increases, and the city has been absorbing that because employee contributions have remained flat for the past couple of years. We've had some inability to make benefit changes to the level plan or increase employee contributions because of the current collective bargaining language. And so we are working with the benefits committee again this fall to look at some changes again, because any changes to that plan have to be approved by 3 of the 5 groups and then brought here for your approval. There is a second plan, a plus plan, which is a high deductible option that has some health savings accounts, a health savings account feature tied to it. It has had limited enrollment. There's about 30 employees in that plan. It's a much more cost-effective plan. What we have seen is that new employees who are coming in are familiar with this type of a program, and they seem interested in it, but we can do some more communications to highlight some of the attractive features of that program, because that is one aspect that can control your costs. The other aspect of health reform is that it's changing the way that we're going to administer these changes, is that now it requires that any change in the plan has to be given 60 days notice to participants, so it just speeds up the process when we have to get started on all of this. The final item on this page is just that the health plan vendor itself hasn't been bid in about 10 years. So that is one of the things that we're working on this fall to see what kind of savings we can get out of either a better fixed cost arrangement with the health plan vendor or perhaps better discounts from another vendor.
So along that point, and you're probably not the right person to direct this to, and maybe this is directed in a more public manner, one of the things that I've obviously been talking about is what will occur is the county will do this process. The Board of Education for Washington County will go through this process. The City of Hagerstown will go through this process. And our community college here will go through this process. And I would only remind folks that in a jurisdiction just over the mountain, they have recognized the synergies that exist by going through this process as one entity together, saving cost, meeting those parameters, and saving the taxpayer at large while providing a competitive plan by the numbers. I mean, it's you're getting a better product by buying it in bulk. So I just I don't see why we're not starting those conversations, and I think that if we're going to navigate a path forward, not just for our budget, but for the costs to all parties combined, I think that that should be part of the conversation equation.
So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, the city is unique in some ways, as we do offer retiree benefits where I believe the county does not.
the county does not, but the school board does, right?
Right.
And I don't imagine that those jurisdictions that worked out that arrangement, you know, are all exactly the same either. You know, that there were certainly unique circumstances within each of those jurisdictions to navigate that process.
I mean, I think that's a topic that certainly is, you know, worthy of discussion.
That's why I said you're not
but,
the right person to direct that.
But what you would be when you do a group purchasing effort like that, what you would be really saving on, because all of those plans are self-funded. I'm not sure about the community college, but the other ones are. So you're really looking at only getting some savings on the administrative fee, which is pretty negligible in the terms of the entire cost of your program. You know, the bulk of your expenses are claims. So you would be giving up some kind of flexibility in terms of your vendor selection in exchange for some marginal savings. But it, you know, it's certainly worth exploring, and if that's something that the committee wants to do, then we can help you with that. The last page just has the timeline. So the health plan vendor RFP is going on right now. Again, we're working with the benefits committee. We meet on just about a monthly basis. So we're going to be looking at some recommendations to plan design changes. And their timing is such that we want to bring our recommendations of vendor and plan changes to you all in January, and then identify, you know, the new rates and contributions for participants in the February-March time period so that we can start communication and rolling out enrollment to participants in May.
Now, are these changes subject to the negotiations with the bargaining groups, the ones you're talking about? So if we happen to have signed a long-term contract with one of them, we couldn't change it without another
3 out of
vote?
5.
It depends on the language that's in the contract. Yeah,
Well,
yes.
of course it does, but, you know, right, I'm sorry, but if we haven't, you know, if we haven't allowed for that in the contract, we could be stuck with that.
Correct.
Or if we had a shorter time frame, that would allow us to renegotiate it as well. Just things to keep in mind when we, you know.
Before we do 9 months worth of work.
Contracts, yeah. Thank you.
Becky, I have 2 general questions, and you may not be the right person, but I want to ask. It looks to me like this plan, what you've talked about, is essentially saying, you guys ought to be hiring young people. We're going to hurt, in that regard, we're going to hurt old people. I mean, in effect, that's what I'm hearing. Am I right or wrong?
No, typically the trend of what we're seeing from the private sector is more consumer-driven healthcare. So our newer hires, whether they be younger, older, or in between, are more comfortable or familiar with these plan offerings, because a lot of the major private employers have the healthcare reimbursement accounts tied into some of these higher deductible plans.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I found the figures on the chart on page 2 with regard to medical inflation and dental inflation to be fairly interesting. From July 1, 2012 to July 30th, 2013, they were virtually the same, the amount of inflation. But then all of a sudden, the dental, for some reason, the dental falls by 9%. Per year, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, dentists aren't going to get any less expensive, and their equipment's going to be more costly. Is there any explanation for that?
So dental trend tends to average around 5% a year, so it tends to be about 3 points below health plan trend. But yeah, in the past couple of years, your dental plan's been running pretty well. And so there was also a change in the dental vendor, which was yielding a better network and better discounts, so that's helping it stay down as well.
Okay. Well, these figures are a little suspicious, I think. Dropping from 11.5% down to 2.2%.
I think a change in vendor probably would.
Yeah, but no one wants to go to Frederick to get their dental.
Actually, the
Care.
change really broadened the network, and that's what helps, is because under the prior dental network, there were a lot of employees using dentists that didn't participate in the network, and so you're paying much higher reimbursements, and so the change in, we knew which dentists people were using, and then the change in providers really broadened that. So now, without people changing their dentists, everybody's reaping some savings.
Our dental plan was only in the state of Maryland under Care First, and now it's a nationwide network. So those people who live in other states as well are now in network.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this is just a nice time to acknowledge Susan, because everybody's dealt with Susan Delauter before. She's the primary staff person for administering our health care plan, dealing with a lot of employees, a lot of retirees. It's not easy work, it's complicated work, it's confidential work, and she does a very nice job. Everybody knows Susan, and we've all had conversations with her at some point. So you don't see her often, but she does a nice job on that, and I think deserves a lot of appreciation.
Thank you, Susan.
Great.
Thank you, Susan.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we have Street Lamp Holiday Program, Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation. Karen Giffin is going to come up and tell us about that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Hello, welcome.
2 years ago, we began a program with the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Foundation, where they go out and get sponsors for signs at the street lamps. And the city puts them up during the holiday season. It helps to raise money for Barbara Ingram, brings people down to see their signs. And the foundation does give back $1,000 of those proceeds to go towards labor. And we were hoping that for a third year in a row that we could do this again.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. I thank you as staff, and I'm also the secretary of the board for the Barbara Ingram Foundation.
Well, thanks for all the work
Okay.
in the community, Karen.
Okay.
Good job.
Looking forward to seeing those lamp posts. All right. Next up on the agenda is discussion about Memorial Park Phase 2. So we have distinguished city engineer Rodney Tissue joining us today.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. In your packet is a memo on a proposal that we have for you tonight. I'd like to just kind of quickly review it. I have some PowerPoint slides of the exhibits so that everybody can see how it came together for us. But just a little background first on the Memorial Park. The original concept of this park was approved back in 2010. And at that time, the mayor and council decided this was the location that they wanted to have a park that recognized citizens and events of our history, noteworthy citizens. And with that overall concept, we started putting together some of the designs. In 2011, a concept plan was put together that's on the screen that at the corner of Memorial Boulevard and Potomac Street would be an open area that would have in the front towards Potomac Street, directly across from Bester Elementary School. Get out my pointer here. It's not working. So on the Potomac Street side would be a plaza that would, at that time was envisioned that it would be a nice place to recognize citizens or have memorial services there, like Flag Day ceremonies or anything like that. Throughout the park there were walkways and also benches and just kind of a passive park. So we completed phase 1 last summer, and I'm sure everybody has seen this. Basically what we have out there now is the paths, the lights, some trees, the park sign. We uncovered a portion of Marsh Run that was a parking area that we had to basically condemned because it was not fit for cars to park on anymore. So that's all been taken care of. The run's been opened up. You can walk over and look down into the run. So all that's finished. Kind of the bones of the park, the infrastructure. So now tonight I wanted to talk to you about where we go next. So I guess going back to this first phase, along Potomac Street where the plaza is, the concept I'm going to show you is that would be an area that recognizes people, citizens who have made distinguished themselves or noteworthy things in history. The path then that meanders through the park, and I'm specifically talking about the one that goes around the perimeter of the park, that would be to recognize events, historical events. And I'll go over that here in a second. So the plaza, this concept, this is looking down on the plaza. Potomac Street is at the bottom of the page. And it's fairly simple. Plaza with benches that are masonry benches, a fountain. Maybe the best view of it, though, is this. This is a view like if you were standing at Bester Elementary looking across the street. On there is, you can see the fountain in the center, which is fairly simple, but hopefully an elegant water structure. The benches around the outside, and then the four pillars are what we're calling the Hall of Honor. And I'll have details of those in a little bit. Again, this area is to distinguish people, citizens of our community. This is a view from the park. Looking at the other way, you can see the four pillars, the Hall of Honor, the flagpoles, etc. This is a sketch of what we think the fountain might be. We don't want it to overwhelm the park. We want it to be a nice water feature, but it's not the reason the park is there. It's just adds to it, and the reason that plaza is there is obviously to recognize the people that are on those plaques. So the Hall of Honor wall, what we're proposing, and all this is subject to change and certainly your input, but what we're proposing is a simple wall, four of those in the plaza with four plaques on each side that each plaque would recognize a person of the history of the community that has made significant contributions. And then for the historic events, what we're proposing is in this sketch, as you go around the perimeter of the park, those little red marks are these historic markers, and on each of those markers is a historic event. So as you start at the plaza and you start walking around, it's basically a timeline of Hagerstown history. The first thing you'd come to obviously would be something about Jonathan Hager, and the last thing you come to, as we're suggesting in the memo, might be the university coming downtown or BISFA coming downtown. And Steve and Kathy have put together a nice list of 16 events that could be used on these plaques. So as far as cost goes, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve, he has some things he wants to add. We did a cost estimate of everything that I've just shown you, and it's about $108,000. We currently have $55,000 in POS money. I said in the memo it's CDBG money. That's my mistake. It's POS money that we have funded by the state. That's with our match. Then the balance, which is $53,000, our options would be we could either use developer-paid excise tax like we've done on some of these other small park projects. We could budget CDBG money in the upcoming fiscal year. We could fundraise for it. We could apply for community legacy money, which we've applied for once and got turned down. But to me, what's more community legacy than what we're doing here? I mean, it's perfect, but we got turned down. So those are our options on how to get the rest of the money. Four different things there. So, Steve, do you have things you want to add?
Good evening. Rodney pretty much covered just about everything. Rodney asked that I help out with this project a little bit to give some ideas on how the park could be to focus on heritage while at the same time not being a particularly active park. Still keep it as a passive park, not make it something that looks like a cemetery or anything like that. The ideas that we came up with are generalized ideas. They're subject to any amount of massaging depending on budget, desire of the council and the community, et cetera. For example, the Wall of Honor concept, the bronze plaques we're finding that individually they could actually be expensive. Maybe we could look at, if this concept is adopted, instead engrave the material right into the granite pillar that's there, and then maybe just have a bronze image of the person rather than the whole thing. So there's a number of variables that could be looked into here. So we want to emphasize that these are generalized concepts, not hard, written in stone, no pun intended, ideas. With the Wall of Honor, it's a concept that would need to be developed. There would need to be a focus on whether it's the community as a whole or strictly a military kind of thing. So there's a number of directions that if that route was to be followed, developed into exactly what the mayor and council and the community want for that provision. Also, the idea with the Wall of Honor is that if it's adopted, the first thing that would happen is that rigid criteria, so this is truly the highest of Hagerstown's history, would be placed in there. And a critical mass would need to be created on the front end in order for some there to be there. And then what would happen is after that, every year then the city can pick one or two people and add, kind of almost like the Baseball Hall of Fame does every year, adding a couple people to it and having a ceremony, draw attention to it, to draw attention to the heritage. Your primary expense there is the initial capital cost of creating it. Adding a couple of people every year is a relatively marginal cost in the grand scheme of things, if that's taken. But we have three concepts here. And again, it's we're looking for what particular ones this body may like. Maybe you like all of them, maybe you don't like any of them. But the first one is the wall, which I think we pretty much completed description of here. The other thing with the timeline is that those markers would be spaced. In other words, it'd be, as you go around the trail, a certain amount of length of the trail corresponds to a certain amount of time. So the markers wouldn't necessarily be evenly spaced throughout the park. It would be along the timeline to their relevance. So there might be a couple markers fairly close together. Maybe it might be a space where there's more in between. Last one that we put in there as a possible suggestion is a monument within the plaza to veterans of Hagerstown, represented by one individual. We did a little pricing, and we're finding that the minimum that something like that would cost is about $30,000, which would probably require some sort of fundraising campaign if it was to be adopted. But one suggestion in my research that I had for you as somebody who might represent that is a gentleman by the name of George Fisher. We included a biography of him in the packet that you received, and I don't want to spend time going through the whole 2-page worth of bullet points, but the man served in 4 different war periods over 6 decades, plus he was very active in Hagerstown's community and a large number of organizations. His record of service was just absolutely incredible, but he's one of those people who kind of flies under the radar. And the idea is that it would be a bronze statue of him sitting on the wall around the fountain, and then perhaps some interpretive material next to him explaining the story, and then having him represent veterans as a whole. And it would portray him later in life as he's looking back on his life. And one possible idea to consider on that is, in the plaza, he wore so many hats in his life that you take panels within the plaza on the ground and engrave into them images of the various hats that he would have worn: a Civil War hat, a Spanish-American War hat, a World War I hat, a fireman's hat, a railroader's hat. He touched so many different elements of Hagerstown's community and history. And then it'd be kind of like the man of many hats. Initially, we thought about the possibility of actually doing bronze hats, but that would become a safety issue, people tripping over them, et cetera. But the idea of maybe having them engraved into the pavers around the plaza, and it helped also explain his story within the community. And that's one suggestion that I offered, is if the city were to do that, I would suggest that that's probably the best person to represent the community as a whole, because his record was just so incredible over time.
Both civilian and
Both
Military
civilian and military, yes. So that's kind of where we're at. The idea was to come up with a variety of possibilities that would kind of help flesh out the park with amenities, not be overly intrusive, and give you options as far as, in other words, not just come to you with just one idea, multiple ideas, and perhaps you'll like one of them, two of them, three of them. But, so we thought we'd give you kind of a mixed bag of offerings.
Just to clarify, as the staff talked about this, we did talk, and one thing I suggested they at least consider is that the memorials be more than just a military memorial, because you could have a government leader, you could have a famous musician, you could have someone that worked with children that may not be a veteran, a major industrialist, a teacher.
Right.
So,
Sure. Community as a whole.
I think to think of the scope of the historical recognition will probably be something you'll want to consider.
At one point, those 4 pillars will fill up, and the idea is that at that point, when that happens, years down the road, whenever that is, that there would be a low wall that would be installed over to the south end of the site, over by the Marsh Run channel, and it would be picked up at that point over there. So then the new inductees, 20 years from now, whenever, it would be carried over there. So we'd have your initial 4 panels by the fountain, and then it would pick up down the road over toward Marsh Run.
This is a very nice concept. It's been well thought through. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. I mean, let's make sure that the pillars aren't going to be easily turned over by vandals like they do in graveyards. Let's make sure that the materials that are used are going to be long-lasting, so people 50 and 75 and 100 years from now can read them. This is going to be at some point very, very historic and attract people on that basis alone. So, but this is a really neat idea.
What's the difference between the bronze plaques and engraving? I think an engraving would be hard to read and difficult to do.
It would depend on the material that the pillar is made of. I found that as an issue when we were coming up with cost estimates for the Lion Post Memorial. The original concept for that was actually a granite cube, essentially, with a sloped top with a bronze plaque on the front. And we found that engraving directly into stone the same message is far less expensive than bronze, and has a durability factor. We actually got that guidance from the staff down at Rose Hill Cemetery, suggesting look at carving straight into stone rather than a bronze plaque. Also, bronze with a value to it has a tendency in cemeteries to disappear and end up in recycling facilities. So perhaps we could, if obviously everything that we do is on a budget, if we're looking at ways of stretching our dollar further and also making it more durable, maybe look at direct engraving, and then instead of having the entire plaque be bronze, maybe just the image of the person be bronze, and that would cut way down, and then we could possibly get more inductees into the initial phase of it.
I think outdoor art contributes greatly to a community too, and fits nicely with other things that could follow from it in Hagerstown, in other parks and so on. Good piece of work. And incidentally, Steve, you did a great job. Slightly change of subject. You did a great job on the booklet for Rose Hill Cemetery.
Thank you.
I didn't have time to read it until after the ceremony because I hadn't seen it until that day.
Mm-hmm.
But you put a lot of time and effort into that, and it was very professional.
My wife and daughter are happy to have me back.
Any other feedback or questions?
Well, are we hereby approving this list of historic things, or can we look at it and get back to you?
However you want to handle that. I mean, we have time.
I guess I would like to make some comments, but I'm not prepared right now.
I think at the planning office level, we looked at it as a list of suggestions.
Suggestions at the moment.
Yeah,
But it's not like we're approving it tonight, is what I want to make clear. Okay.
Yeah, I think their request is just to see if they're generally on the right track.
Generally,
with what they're
yeah.
doing.
It's a general thing, yeah.
And then, what are you thinking about the additional funding that's needed to move forward with this? Any thoughts on how we approach that? I guess again, the options were CDBG, excise tax, community legacy, or fundraising.
It was open space, not CBG.
for some
Well,
company.
you said open space.
Additional. Right now, we
All
have
the above
POS.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, all the above, that works. Community legacy ought to
Now we
work
have POS money.
on the second or third time.
If we ask for additional POS money, it would be 2015 until we could actually
All
make
right,
this
well, if
happen.
we can move forward with CDBG or something, that'd be
yeah.
good. Yeah.
You could check with Karen about fundraising.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's some of the clubs around the county.
Yeah,
around
that
town.
would be good, especially for the walls, the things that are honoring people and so.
And Don pointed out the issue of public art, and that's something that we've been trying to develop a little bit of a trend toward. For example, the last mayor and council approved a statue of George Washington that we're in the final stages of fundraising for, that's planned for downtown, representing him in his youth. Here we have some, if that model is selected, we're representing somebody toward the end of their life, whereas we're downtown, we're going with a model of George Washington when he was 20 years old here in the French and Indian War. So the idea is, as you get a few of these around town, you develop a little bit of that public art, as you mentioned.
There's also a plan for a statue in City Park, right?
Right, we've applied for a grant, a group from the museum, the Fine Arts the Arts Council, the Valley Arts Association, and the city. We worked on a grant, and it looks like we're going to get it. So we'll have that official word here soon, and then we'll be back to this body to talk more about it.
I think that the question about funding, which is obviously the question I have, isn't so much a question of where else, but for me, where not to. In other words, if you were coming to me with this project and you said, look, it's $110,000, we got 55, which means we make up the other 55, for me, if we are not successful in identifying the funding in one of those additional sources, I don't think that saying, well, we'll include 55,000 in the general fund, as a process for next year. Just for me, be the appropriate direction.
I don't think we'll have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you said we're gonna take it from another project that came in under, I think is sort of that last acceptable
I
result.
think there's enough out there.
I agree with Kristen's comment.
With Karen. Also, I see Linda's in the audience, and haven't seen her since she's left, and what is the input of the community down there? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We initially talked when we did the phase 1 and looked over some of those things and got their input.
And Rodney, I ask this question every time, but I just want to hear it public. If there's ever a trail from the park over to the east end, there's room, you've allowed room in the site plan
Yes.
to do a trail.
Right.
Okay.
It would be there today if it wasn't for the railroad.
Yeah,
And
I know.
crossing
The
that
railroad
is the
thing.
difficulty.
I understand.
The other group we've talked to a lot about this is Bester Elementary School, and they're very excited about it, and they're very interested in using it as part of their history curriculum and doing what they can to make use of this park too. So.
And at some point before this council is looked at again, I would like to be able to look at something for Vietnam.
Okay.
I've had that's been more and more now that has come to me about having a monument
memorial.
for the
Okay.
Vietnam War.
I think Kristen's right with regard to his comments about funding. This is such an attractive proposal that it's going to attract money. I mean, you all have done a great job on thinking this whole thing through.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
That brings us to our last agenda item, and that is Stormwater Management Retrofit Study.
It's just a follow-up on our discussion of last week, and as promised from about 2 months, maybe 3 months ago, Jim's going to go over the study that we did of the community and potential projects and where we want to go from here. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. As we've mentioned in some of the previous presentations, the city is categorized as a Phase 2 community for NPDES, for stormwater. And We have strong indications from the Maryland Department of the Environment that the next NPDES permit that the city receives, which will probably be sometime in 2014, is going to include a requirement that we treat the runoff from 20% of the impervious area in the city, mainly focusing on areas that don't have any stormwater treatment now. But the whole idea is trying to reduce the amount of pollutants that end up in Antietam Creek and then eventually in the Chesapeake Bay. So in anticipation of that, we secured a grant early this year, a small grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust to fund a study to look at potential sites for stormwater retrofit projects around the city, to rank them, and then in a couple cases sort of flesh out some concept plans of what these projects would actually look like. And that's what this memo presents, the results of that study. We hired a consultant, URS Corporation, to perform the study. They did a review of data that the city already had in-house on stormwater facilities. Then they did a lot of field reconnaissance here in town, driving around and looking at different candidate sites. And they ended up identifying a total of 41 potential sites for projects here in Hagerstown. And it was a mix of both sites that are publicly owned on city-owned land or city-controlled land, and also private sites that aren't under the aren't under city ownership, but they still represented good opportunities to meet some of these stormwater requirements. So out of the 41 sites that they looked at, they went through a fairly extensive scoring process to try to rank these sites, and they looked at various criteria. One obviously being, does the city own the land, or would it be a private ownership situation where we'd have to work with property owners to let us do a retrofit there. Obviously cost or estimated cost of the project. They mainly tried to focus though on projects that sort of had the best combination of a bunch of different factors so that we would get the most bang for our buck if we decided to do these projects. And out of the 41 sites, I think 16 or 17 of them are publicly owned sites. And so we decided at this point to focus on those publicly owned sites and the highest ranked set of those public sites. Not saying that we wouldn't consider the private sites in the future, but a lot of the high ranked projects were public sites. So URS went through this ranking system. There are tables in here in the memo that identify the different public sites that they identified. There's a map in there that shows the location of the public sites that they looked at. So that information is included in the report. But the final step for URS was to actually select a couple of these high-ranked projects and develop concept plans for them so that we could get an idea of, okay, what would a retrofit actually look like at these sites? And more importantly, for these retrofits, get us in the ballpark of cost. How much are we looking at to do these projects? And they actually did concepts for three of the top ranked sites that are in the report. And I'll just briefly talk about those. The first site that they did a concept plan for is actually Hager Park. And there's a copy of the concept plan in the memo. At Hager Park, they proposed taking a portion of the park that's sort of open space now. It's not utilized by the play equipment or some of the other pavilions and things, and actually turning that into what they call a bioretention area. It's basically a big landscaped area that would filter stormwater, take the pollutants out of it, and then discharge the water, let it go on downstream to where it does now. Adjacent to that was a second site that they looked at. They called the Hagerstown Light Department site. It's along the northern edge of Hager Park. It's mainly the Hagerstown Light, or CMG, building and a large parking lot and storage yard that there on that site. It's a lot of impervious area that doesn't have any sort of stormwater treatment. They propose doing what they call a bioswale, or a wet swale or channel or ditch along the edge of that property. It would catch the runoff from that impervious area, would hold it and filter it and treat it, and again it would discharge it downstream. The third site that they looked at was actually down near the wastewater treatment plant, near the intersection of Bowman Avenue and Frederick Street. There's some unused land or undeveloped land just as you turn onto Bowman Avenue off of Frederick Street. On the right-hand side, it's close to the barn facility. And that also is an opportunity to develop another bioretention area, another one of these stormwater filters to catch some of the runoff, not so much from the city's property there. It would actually be catching runoff from HBP and some of the properties that are in that end of the industrial park. But it would treat that water and then discharge it downstream. To give you an idea on costs for doing these sort of retrofit projects, the two larger ones, the two bioretention areas, the one at Hager Park and the one down at Clean Water Circle, they both came in at about $500,000 each, just a little bit under $500,000 per project. The swale, the wet swale or bioswale at Hagerstown Light Department, which is much less extensive and much less expensive, it was, I believe, like $30,000 to do that, but it doesn't treat as big an area of impervious surface. I guess the other thing to take away too from the study is, if you did these three projects, these three retrofit projects, it would end up treating a total of approximately 16 acres of impervious area. That's about 5% of what we think we're going to have to treat in the new permit. So three projects at $1 million, and thinking that we may have to do 20 more sets of projects like this to comply with the regulations.
So there's the 20% that you were talking about is the 350 acres?
Yes.
That we would be required to treat. Gotcha. Yeah, that's about $60,000 per acre.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
That's depending on the final issuance of that permit, right?
It is.
We're still speculating a little bit about the permit.
It was speculating a little bit, although the 20% part of it has been talked about for a couple years by MDE, and it seems almost a certainty that that's going to be in the new permit.
And we don't anticipate any money is going to come from the state to help us with this, do we?
Not,
no.
No, not immediately, at least. There are talks through the whole WIP program, the Watershed Improvement Program. They are talking about charging additional fees, this accounting for growth component of the WIP, where they would ask developers to contribute or offset what they're doing to the environment. That money, we don't really know where it's going. It's going to be going to the state, and then theoretically they could be pumping it back to communities to help with these projects, but in the short term at least that doesn't seem very likely. So this, we did want to show you the results of the study. I guess we're not asking for any action at this point, but we would like to get a sense from the council of how to proceed or how aggressively to proceed, because you know, these few projects obviously have a big financial impact, and as we go into the budget season and we're looking at CIP budgets over the next 5 years, I guess we need some sort of direction on how aggressive to be and how many of these projects should we start programming for in the budget.
I guess I'll start if I.
Go for it.
Number one, it is, as the mayor said, a unfunded mandate. It's clearly an unfunded mandate, and the General Assembly has backed down from what they've required us to do and the counties to do. And we're left with the constant dilemma, if we do it and pay the expenses and other communities don't do it, where does that leave us? And I'm, a prime advocate for environmental action, but this is going to be tough if just our citizens are loaded with it. A couple of questions. Are these sites reusable, or can you do anything on the surface, or are they just entirely devoted to this treatment? Can they be parkland on top, or is it like a stormwater pond that you can't do anything with?
The bioretention areas that have been built in Hagerstown are more like landscaping features that we've seen. They could be used in a limited way as part of a park setting, but they really are sort of set aside to.
Can people walk on them?
They
Can there be trails?
There can be trails through them, they can be integrated in it. The thing that limits those is the way they filter is there's a special mix of soil that goes in, and you really can't be disturbing the way that soil functions. You
Right.
could have trails through it, but
So
not.
we can put in pervious surfaces on top of it. No,
Exactly.
they'd be gravel. Do any of these contribute? Now, one problem that I've constantly brought to state staff is you want to encourage downtowns, you want to encourage urban development, and yet, as I understand it, buildings downtown will have to either do very weird things because they're stacked up against each other, or we'll have to do stormwater somewhere else to allow for that urban development. Do any of these, would any of these be, and the state probably hasn't gone this far, but attributable for downtown development or something that would count in lieu of doing things to make our buildings more expensive downtown?
Well, it's certainly something that we've been thinking about at the staff level, and I wouldn't necessarily say that out of the 16 or 17 sites that URS identified that are publicly owned, that they specifically said this is a good candidate to help with downtown redevelopment. I think some of them certainly would apply. For instance, the Hager Park site, it ends up receiving runoff from some properties in the East End, and I think that you could start to pull some of those in under the umbrella that this is providing treatment.
But didn't the state talk about giving credit for stormwater efforts that don't necessarily immediately flow from the affected buildings?
And that is sort of the direction,
Area.
and it's sort of the direction that we're hearing from MDE. This permit is going to say treat 20%, but it's not going to say it has to be done in certain parts of the city, or it doesn't necessarily have to treat a certain section. I think they're looking at a percentage.
Getting to
So
20% or...
I think that you're absolutely right. Trying to do these stormwater projects in the very densely developed urban core is difficult. I think we're probably looking at some of these outskirts sites
Right.
to
But I would
compensate
like
for
to
that.
hear from MDE that we get some credit so we don't have to do crazy things with buildings downtown, which is some of the stuff I've heard. Yeah. And finally, these private sites, are they sites that they're just privately owned? Are we responsible for them, or?
Well, the majority of the private sites that they looked at were actually sites that have, a lot of them were commercial developments that have an existing stormwater management pond that could be retrofitted to provide better treatment. In those cases, in virtually every case in the city on these private sites with a private pond, the city, the city doesn't have any ownership in that pond.
Right.
We have a maintenance agreement with the property owner requiring them to maintain that pond, but it's not under the city's direct control.
Oh, I understand
other
that, but
than
who's
maintenance.
responsible for doing those?
Making the retrofits?
Yeah.
It'll be
It's another one of
cooperation.
those murky
My
things.
guess is they'll let us do it
Okay.
if we spend the money and then take it over permanently
I-
or something, you know.
We don't have any jurisdictional authority.
I don't think so. It's their property. We have the right to inspect it. We have the right to fix them if there's a emergency, but I don't think we have jurisdiction to go in there and actually retrofit them or change them
The
without
350
their approval.
acres that they're going to require us to do something with includes public and private property.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
They're just looking at acreage. They're
Right.
not making a distinction.
But our hands are somewhat tied if either the private property owners don't want to retrofit or they don't want to contribute to the expense of retrofitting them. Then what do? We go back to the state and say, well, these private property owners don't want to do this or they don't want to let us do it. How do we overcome that barrier?
I guess I have an idea, but I'm going to wait. I'd like to hear from other council members.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Apparently there was some decision made in the past that sidewalks, future sidewalks or something, would have areas along the edge that would not be filled in with concrete. I see it down in front of the tourism office downtown, and other places. On Locust Street, there's right across from Burkett's, there's some. Is that a policy of the city?
Well, it is actually the city's standards for new street construction. You have the street and the curb,
Yeah.
and then we have as a standard that you will have a grass strip before you would get to the sidewalk. And that grass strip serves several functions. It's not only for doing something with runoff, but it's a place to pile snow in the winter. It's a place to put signs
Right.
and other things in that strip. So our standard is to have that strip on the
Okay.
streets.
Now, does this plan include any of that throughout the rest of the city? Any of that that's likely to occur over the next 3 years, 5 years?
It doesn't, because the focus of this 20% treatment, they want us to treat 20% of the impervious area that they think was there before 1985. They want us to go
pretty
back.
much everything.
In 1985 is the year that they say that's when stormwater management actually started to happen in Maryland. So anything that was impervious that was there before 1985, they're saying probably doesn't have any sort of treatment,
Okay,
and
so-
that's where they
So
want
the
us
answer
to.
to my question is no. Okay. Is there anything, any area that can be, where the impervious surface can be removed? Like old streets perhaps that are no longer used, or concrete areas that are no longer used that could be
Converted.
converted, but
Ground up,
not
yeah.
included in this?
I'm sure there are. I don't know about streets so much, but.
Because that would be a fairly cheap operation compared to this.
It would.
Okay, and my final question is, the mayor keeps talking about, rightfully so, enhancing water features in Hagerstown. Is there anything, any conversion that could be done that fits in with a plan to do that? Putting more water in downtown, for instance. I mean, is that a likely thing, an unlikely thing, or any possibility? What do you think?
Well, I mean, Rodney can speak to this too. I think it's difficult to do in downtown because we don't have a ready source of
Okay, but in
surface
the east-
water.
Yeah, but in the East End, okay, where the stadium is.
That would be a possibility. We were just talking this week also at the Melt facility. You know, if that site was reused into some sort of a park area or something, I think we could certainly look at incorporating some of these things into whatever that site would turn into. So yes, I mean, anywhere that we could remove impervious area, that obviously would be, you're right, that would be a very inexpensive thing to do. We don't know that there are a lot of opportunities on city-owned property to do that.
Okay, now, one final question, this is it. Aren't there materials through which water flows now that you can use to cover land? Like, isn't there macadam that will allow water to flow through it?
There is.
Can we replace old macadam with new macadam?
I was in Rockville last week to look at some of their parks issues. I was telling you about that. And the one park we went into, the parking lots were all made of impervious, or what they call pervious pavement, which means pervious, meaning the water can go through it. Then there's a stone reservoir underneath of it that collects the water. It's treated before it's released and downstream.
Filter system?
Mhm, yeah. So there are pavements now that, you know, the old style, pavers that have either gravel or grass growing up through them, water soaks through them. You're going to see more and more of those kind of things being used again, impervious pavement, and there are different things like that. Whether or not we should be tearing up our parking lots, putting those down, I'm not sure that'll be feasible or not, but if we build new parking lots, we may want to go that way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there any movement towards requiring, like if there's a new shopping center, that portion of that parking lot have those kinds of pervious surfaces?
Well, the stormwater management regulations that were passed in 2009 call for what they call environmental site design, which means you're supposed to look at a whole development site. You're supposed to try to minimize the amount of impervious surface you create, maintain existing drainage patterns, that sort of thing. And then when you've done all that and you still are increasing the runoff, then you need to look at features that you can do that will bring you back into their level of requirements. And certainly they are, in the design manual, they certainly talk about permeable surfaces as one effective way of doing that. But as Rodney said, I think that there's certainly limitations too to doing that. So there isn't a specific requirement that says a developer has to do a certain portion of a parking lot improvement, but the overall requirement is there, and they can incorporate that if they choose to.
I believe an example of that is the Centra Bank the new bank on the dual highway at the corner of Mount Etna Road. If you drive into that parking lot, you'll see part of it is pavers that is for stormwater management, and the rest of it's paved with asphalt. So that's exactly why they're there, for stormwater.
And actually, a very small part of the Sonic restaurant site further out on Dual Highway has sort of a permeable paver area as well.
You'll see more and more of that.
Go ahead.
Well, while I appreciate the data here, I think that there are a couple of things missing, one of which is the notion of sort of putting the private things, you know what I mean, on the back burner. And the reason I say that is because if you look at some of our higher priority rankings of properties to consider, you lose parkland. And it's a trade-off. So if I am going to take up 7 acres of Hager Park to make it a stormwater management pond, I've lost 7 acres of parkland. And there is a value to that that is comparable to some value for retrofitting an existing stormwater management facility on private property. So if I have to go out and find or identify, reusable park space for Pangburn Park and Staley Park and Hager Park, and these other areas, simply because they're city-owned, for me, doesn't put them at the top of that list, because the trade-off in terms of cost to go out and rebuy that land isn't worth it. And so a couple of things I would like to see in this ranking. Number one is I would like to see those private properties, because I think there's a cost value, a cost benefit there between the public and private. The second is I would place more emphasis on use. In other words, it's great to identify a place like Staley Park or Pangborn Park that says, you know what, we got a quick 3 acres here that can be turned into a stormwater management, and we get some value out of that. But doing that single project loses that valued space, as opposed to looking at 3 properties that the city own, or 1 of which or 2 of which that are privately owned, that says, you know what, that's some pretty useless ground to begin with. No one's going to miss it. And some private property owner might say, hey, yeah, sure, come in and retrofit it, or as part of this process, and save yourself, so to speak, that value-added park space that is planned to be taken up here. Another part goes back to a conversation, in fact, that we went out and looked at it, was on the golf course. And that's an example where, and I think maybe this speaks to Marty's point, of are there areas where it is value added to put that in? That's a good example of that. And I think Melp's a good example of that. I think that the golf course is a good example of that. And I wouldn't want to put them sort of at the bottom of this public lands availability list when you actually gain value by putting something like that in. And a good example, like I said, and I plan on addressing this in my comments tonight, but I'll do it here. When we went out and looked at the golf course, and I said, and we drove around, and I said, you know, nobody here, I think, in this room has any intention of selling the golf course. But the cold, hard fact is we need 28,000 rounds to make it self-supporting, and right now it's about 11,000 rounds. And that's partly a fluctuation of economic climate. But there are ways that as the golf game and golf equipment and play evolves over time, so will the need for our golf course to remain competitive for people to want to play there. And one of the prime opportunities that I would see in this stormwater management endeavor would be to both add amenity and value play to a place like a golf course that we own, and get the value for the credit for that, just as we would the MELP or one of our other spaces. And so those are some of the components I think I would like to see in this type of analysis before eating up big chunks of parkland simply because we already own them. They're already pretty open and accessible to do that with, because we change the nature of those parks forever as soon as we do those things, when the long-term cost benefit would be to take less usable property that we own or private property that will cost us less in the long run to do, to retrofit for these purposes.
So if I, my suggestion would be, the staff has two recommendations to proceed here. One with detailed engineering designs for a number of the highest ranked projects in the list. I think you'd start with the ones you have. I guess I'd be reluctant on that point right now. I would like to see conceptual designs and cost estimates for the remaining projects and go through some kind of evaluation process where we have a cost to weigh and also the relative value of that site, as Kristen says, as well, and look at all the public. Also, so we can get to Annapolis and say, my God, we've got $20 million worth here, and we know it because we've looked at them all and have those numbers are going to be reasonably good. But I don't think we should start until we can look at the whole pot. I don't think we should do detailed design. That would be my recommendation.
You're right. I think you're right. And I think protesting to Annapolis about the cost. I mean, there's no way we can ever afford this.
Just little us isn't going to do much good, but at least we'll have something firm when we're talking about it.
But there's no way we can ever afford this when you get right down to it. I mean, the world might not last long enough to do all these projects. But protesting to Annapolis might get us somewhere.
Well, and I think to Don's point, for me, from the outset, in meeting this state regulatory process and this new state regulatory process was never about how do I meet that state regulatory process. In other words, if I have to come up with a plan that is beyond all reasonable cost scope, to me, I've failed from the outset. I'd rather look at these and say, you know what, I understand what the state is saying that they want local jurisdictions to do, but if they're not ponying up the money, then they're not ponying up the time frame or where we're going to do it or how we're going to do it. But we recognize and we accept that something will be done over time, but we need to decide that it's within an affordable framework for us and our community, and it's within an agreeable cost benefit for us and our community. And I know that leads to all kinds of legal things down the road, but I clearly agree with Don that we will not be the only voice in the room saying that. We might be one of the only voices in the room saying, we understand what you're saying, we're going to try and reasonably do something, but by no means is it going to be under the structure of this $50 million scope that you have arbitrarily mandated upon us to do.
And that's why I think we should get an idea what that scope is and be able to have numbers like these charts back here. That wouldn't be too hard to do, I would presume.
And I'm not about to eat up all of our parks space to meet this state mandate. And I think that needs to be conveyed very clearly, because the state is obviously an entity that puts out programs for POS money and CPP money. I mean, they're putting money out, for us to build these parks and expand these parks and have these parks. I'm certain that the first thing they don't want us to do is eat up these very parks in completely unusable uses, to meet another regulatory demand.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Feel like you have a clear direction?
Yeah, I think this is helpful. We'll start working on sketches and concepts for the ones that are in the study, for the ones that Councilman Alshar mentioned, and we may need some technical assistance with that too, as far as grants and things. We may be applying for some grants to try to help keep that moving, but we're just trying to scramble to stay ahead of this a little bit here, and
You're doing good work.
it's all going to come. We're going to be talking about this a lot. I'll just say it that way.
Can we also consider the possibility of drafting a letter to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, telling them exactly what the impact of this is? I'm sure they don't have any idea whatsoever. And appeal to them to try to give us some legislative relief or budget relief or something.
I think the big counties have been doing that for the last year, especially the Phase 1 communities have basically been saying, I think Frederick County was at $1 point some billion dollars. I mean, it wasn't a small figure. And some of the more urban counties are now recognizing exactly what the legislation meant. And they're clearly going to have a bigger voice in that arena.
Hey, Rodney, it looks like you're going to need that $200,000 after all.
Well, another good argument for statewide is some jurisdictions are dragging their feet and not doing anything. Others are moving ahead, and it's not fair. It's just not fair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, we're just doing great on time here tonight, sticking to our agenda. We're to the city administrator's comments.
None for me this evening.
That's disappointing. Council comments. What?
I'll say thank you.
Mr. Brubaker.
No comments tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Metzner.
Congratulations to the Alsatia Club. Thunder in the Square is very rapidly becoming Thunder in the City. Quite an event, and look forward to expanding and just getting bigger and better.
Ms. Nye?
I would like to know if we could get the utility relief on the agenda for next week.
Actually, it's on for next week.
Is it on for next week for
It's
certain?
not next week, the 8th, it's
Okay.
on for the 15th.
Pardon me?
You demand and you get.
You demand and get. No, it's because there has been monies that has been left over, and then we want to see if we can go forward in having another, because it's going to be crunch time again for a lot of people, so
Yeah,
as
Scott
long
and
as
Beth
it's on.
Are putting it on either for next week or the 15th.
Okay, and Chief, this one's for you, since we play phone tag, but in back of the new library, activities beginning to move quite a bit, especially evening going into later, as well as down around the beauty school. So I don't know what you're going to do with them, because nobody wants to put them anywhere. Okay. I'm continually getting the phone calls as far as the activity, and, with the bottles and everything being left, it's going to be there, so.
And
Yeah.
I do want to recognize the chief and Hagerstown Police Department. They did a security training with the staff at the library, went through all they're implementing new rules and procedures that it's going to start from day one in terms of conduct and behavior at the library, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable.
Good.
And they're ready to hit the ground running when they open on Saturday. So
But
I
they
want to
will
thank
have,
the chief
they
and
will have,
HPD
they
for
will
doing
have
that.
security. They will have security there, right? Yeah, well.
But they've worked
I know.
closely with the police department
Yeah.
on how to implement the best practices.
And that's a good thing, because, when this was all going to happen, it was a matter of everybody got quiet, and there was things that were still happening, so hopefully, they can get a jump on it. But we really need to, however, is to get that cleaned up again. So, and also, I had put a phone call into Eric Dykey, and I know that Eric's busy, but could somebody please find out for me when the street sweeper hits Salem Avenue, and that would be from the area from Burhan's Boulevard going up and including the 7-Eleven. This is about the biggest part of trash being everywhere.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's all.
Mr. Alshire.
I attended the chamber dinner last week, their annual, or I guess every 2 years they pass the gavel. And for anybody else that got a baseball from the chamber with the note that just wanted to let us know that they support our efforts to keep professional baseball in the community and to build a stadium in downtown. Please let us know how the chamber can help. I would say the $2 for the baseball and the $2 to send it is probably the most private capital expended on this project to date.
Mr. Munson.
The Hagerstown, Indiana program trip here was a great trip. And a lot of people put a lot of effort into it, a lot of time, a lot of thought to make it great. But I want to congratulate specifically the city staff for their efforts. The city staff put incredible time and incredible effort into welcoming the people from Hagerstown, Indiana, and showing them around and having discussions with them. And I think that's noteworthy, and I just wanted to commend everybody, and particularly in the city, for doing that.
Thanks. It has been a busy week in Hagerstown, Maryland, here the last week. I want to recognize Tom Reifert again at the CVB. Last Wednesday, I declared it Lex Gillette Day. And for any of those of you who don't know who Lex Gillette is, he is the world champion blind in the Paralympics. He's a blind athlete, and he holds the world record in the long and triple jump. And they hosted a nice reception at 28 South. I want to thank Jay and the folks at 28 South for hosting that. And we welcome Lex back to Hagerstown anytime he wants to come back. I also attended the chamber dinner with Kristen, and want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for all that they do in the community. Obviously, Thunder in the Square, as has been mentioned, was a huge, huge success. My pick was a 1940 Packard that apparently was once owned by the former governor of Maryland, William Preston Lane, who was from Hagerstown and is the one that is the Bay Bridge is named after. So I want to thank all the folks who had a part in putting that together, not only the Alsatia Club, but also the folks at City Hall here who helped make that event possible. Grapes for Girls on Saturday evening was a great turnout and a great fundraiser for Girls Inc. I want to thank the folks there for all the work they do for the children in our community. We had a grand opening today, Juwan and JR's Cafe up on 116 West Franklin Street. Excellent macaroni and cheese that also comes in the form of a biscuit. I encourage you to try it out if you're curious. Great greens, great chicken, and apparently their catfish is to die for. So check them out at 116 West Franklin Street. Also coming up on Friday, October 18th is the Par 4 Pink. It is a 4-man scramble golf tournament, and it benefits Meritus Health's Make a Difference breast cancer screening program, and it's also in conjunction with the Susan G. Komen breast cancer awareness. So that's Friday, October 18th. It's at the Greens at Hamilton Run. Shotguns start at 1 p.m. Lunch and registration starts 11:30. If you have any questions, you can contact Chris. He's the golf pro at the Greens at Hamilton Run. So, and the really big event coming up this Saturday, I want to make sure everybody doesn't forget, is the grand opening of the Washington County Free Library. They sent us this really awesome invitation, and I hope everybody shows up. Please do be reminded that there is going to be traffic closures. So they'll have, beginning at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, South Potomac Street will be closed to traffic between Washington and Baltimore Streets, and Antietam Street will be closed to traffic between Rochester Place and Renaissance Way, the two alleys on either side of Potomac there. So we are very excited about the library opening and look forward to seeing everybody there. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thanks.